Hello, you've reached Gloria with Farmstead Talk, and I am here today with Michael from Western PA Homesteading, and he is representing his state of Pennsylvania in this homesteading interview. Welcome, Michael, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Sure, it's a pleasure. So would you like to share with the audience where they can find you on social media?
Yes, I am on Instagram and I started a podcast, and it's on Spotify and several other podcasting networks at Western PA Homesteading.
Okay, very good. So, Michael, go ahead and share a little bit about yourself and where you're currently living.
Yes, my name's Mike again. My wife's name's Autumn. I'm 27. She's 26. We've been married for about 4 years now, and we're expecting our first child here in September.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, and we live in a little town called Harrisville. It's right in between Pittsburgh and Erie, of course, on the western side of Pennsylvania.
Okay. Describe a little bit about the actual house where you're living now. A little bit, you shared that you take care of your grandma's property as well. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes, when we got married, we moved into town. It's roughly about 860 people, and it basically all it consists of is about a stoplight and a little family restaurant, a little ice cream parlor, gas station. It's a quiet little quaint town, and we're renting the upstairs of a house at the moment, and we do a little stuff in the backyard, and then as well as we talked about at my grandparents' place, they have about 50 acres, about 5 miles away, and we do the majority of our homesteading there as well.
Okay. So tell me what you're actually doing out at your grandma's place.
At my grandma's place, we do some more gardening out there. We have fruit trees such as apples and peaches I take care of. We do a lot of wild berry foraging such as blackberries, raspberries, elderberries. I also tap maple trees.
Okay. And how long has she been there?
Her whole life. She lived across the road, and when she got married, she just moved on the other side of the road. So she's lived on that road her whole life.
Very nice. And so you are and your wife are both native of Pennsylvania,
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. And so you actually live not too far from where you were born?
Yeah, like I said, we moved about 5 miles away from where I grew up at.
Okay, so you have pretty tight roots there. So do either one of you folks live out or work out of the home?
Yes, we both work outside the home. She is a mental health counselor, and I work at a local limestone quarry where we crush limestone.
Okay. Let's talk about your growing zone and any experience that you've had with gardening actually at your property where you're living right now.
Yes, our gardening zone is 5B, and our experience gardening and where we're at right now currently has been pretty good. We grow some tomatoes, we grow our beans there, onions, some squash there.
So what kind of gardening methods do you use?
We're using just an in-ground method, but we're trying to experiment at our place we're living at right now. Since it's smaller, we can do that. So we're trying to experiment with we're going to maybe try some compost. We're going to try some, we call the roof stout method here. We've been learning a lot off of people such as like Joel Salatin and Justin Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
They're big influencers about trying different things and see what works best for us. And then when we later on get our own place, we're going to put those practices into use.
So at the property of your grandmother's house now, will you be making a garden there as well this summer or this spring?
Yeah, we'll be putting a garden in there again because there's so much added space there we can take advantage of.
Okay, very good. Okay, let's talk about, I know that you have a history of hunting, right? So let's talk a little bit about that.
All right, yeah. I started hunting roughly when I was about 13 years old, and my uncle's basically the one who took me out first thing and showed me basically how to go hunting, what to do, and just all the experience with it. My uncle's basically been there by my side.
So what kind of, what are you hunting for now currently?
We basically mainly hunt for deer, venison right at the moment. Basically, that's basically what we mostly eat, so that's what I just stick with.
Okay. And what have you had the history of hunting? So what other types of animals have you hunted in the past?
I've hunted before turkeys. I've hunted ducks before. Um, when I was a younger kid, he took me out for small game hunting. So a little bit of different things, basically.
So what are you doing with the venison now? Like what kind of cuts do you make, or do you ground it up, or what do you do with that?
We mainly grind it up for burger. We use a lot of burger. We'll mix it about 50-50 with beef, and we do that all at home.
And how much are you getting per season? Like how much, what does the state allow for you to cook, to hunt for every year?
Well, you can hunt for one antlered deer every year with your license, but then you always have a chance to send for doe license. So you can get from either one doe license up to 3 or 4, depending how many you apply for or you want to pay for. But we usually just get about ranging from 1 to 3 deer at the most, and we give a lot away to family.
Okay. So with that, what type of, how do you preserve that meat if you have too much? Probably put it in the freezer. But you also had mentioned that you do other types of food preservation. You want to share with what types of preservation you utilize?
Yeah, for the venison, we do a lot of pressure canning with it. We cube it up because we use a lot of it for stews. And for the vegetable side of it and fruit and stuff, we do a lot of pressure canning and hot packing.
Okay, so I know that you and I had a conversation about hot packing. Share what, just real briefly about it. What does that hot packing look like? I know you said that your grandmother had done it for so many years, and now you do that as well.
For instance, a lot of the mainly thing we hot pack is our stew tomatoes. So basically, I'll run through my tomatoes through a food mill, and I'll put it on the stove in a pot, and I'll let it simmer for about, I would say, about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, half an hour, and that boils some of the water out of it. And then I'll have my mason jars in the oven, keep them nice and warm and hot. And then while it's on the pot simmering, piping hot, I'll just ladle it right into the mason jar, and I'll have lids simmering too in a pot of water. And I'll just put the lid on it, screw the band on it, and just leave it sit. Then eventually it'll just seal itself, and I never had an issue with it yet.
That's awesome. Sounds a lot easier than reprocessing it again.
It is. It's 10 times easier.
Is there anything else that you can?
Yeah, I besides the vegetables, some fruit, and the venison, like I'll preserve my maple syrup that I make every year.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your family history of having meat shops and having butchers in the family. What did that look like, and how has that impacted your life?
Yes, my dad is a meat manager at a grocery store, and he's also had a meat shop at home where we lived at. So my whole life as a kid, I always remember coming from the slaughterhouse, the people would bring over sides of beef and pork over, and we did the deer for the local hunters too as well during season. And it's impacted me in a positive way because all I knew growing up in life was the local meat. I didn't really know too much about going to a grocery store and getting the food lot meat. Basically, grew up in a food lot, and I really I'm blessed to know that where my food comes from, and it's great to know because like if we raise a pig at home at the grandparents' house, like we're able to cut it up ourselves, and I can utilize that skills for myself in the future.
That's awesome. That is a blessing to have that, and then to actually have still. So you have all the equipment still in the family, right?
Yeah, my dad still has all the equipment. He also has a smokehouse still and everything. So it's great that we still have all that stuff.
Yes, it is. Yep. Because that can be one of the biggest, if you're not doing your own butchering or slaughtering, at your homestead, that's one of your biggest expenses is sending your meat out. So
Oh, by far, yes. And you feel more connected to where it came from as well.
absolutely, yeah. Let's talk a little bit. You were talking about elderberry syrup, and it seems like elderberry syrup for the last couple of years have been very, very trendy. What are your thoughts about the effectiveness of that? And then also talk a little bit about how you make that and jar it up and keep it for your family.
Yeah, I just got into it probably roughly a couple years ago, and basically we use it for the cold and flu season. If we feel a bug coming on in our body, we automatically will just take the jar out of the fridge, and we'll take a couple spoonfuls every few hours just to try to keep it out of our system so we don't get run down with it. And all our elderberries I forage is around my grandparents' place or locally around here that I drive around and find it wildly growing. And then I end up cooking it down with some water, and I add local raw honey and some cinnamon sticks into it, and I ladle it into jars once it's fully cooked. And they're good, not for the whole year, but for the majority of the year. We make enough just for us to use, so we don't go have too
Do
much
you
of it.
use dried elderberries or do you use them fresh?
The first year we did it, we bought dried elderberries online, but this
Uh-huh.
year we didn't buy, we found local berries growing around the property, and we harvested those.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a difference in using fresh versus the dried ones?
I don't know too much of a difference. They may be, but I don't notice too much of a difference.
Do you feel like it's an effective treatment to prevent cold and flu?
Yeah, I feel like it. I feel like you need to use it right away when you start feeling something come on strong. But I would recommend that way. But I'm sure you can use it whenever you're down, really down low, or even use it all year round just to keep your immune system up.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Um, Next, let's talk about your making of the maple syrup, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this. It's just amazing to me. I don't live in that area of the country where it's very prevalent for making maple syrup. So let's talk a little bit about the practices and the steps of how you make maple syrup.
Yes, so we have plentiful maple trees around our place, so we're able to tap them. And you got to find a suitable tree. So depending on the size of the tree, depends how many taps you could put in. So I find a tree bigger than a basketball size and round and start with that. And so
And when
basically,
you say a basketball size, you're meaning like the circumference of the tree. Is that correct?
yeah, the circumference of the trunk of the tree. Yes, I don't go
Okay.
much smaller than that. I try to find more bigger trees than that. And then I take a drill bit and I drill in a tree about 1.5 to 2 inches deep, because if you go any deeper than that, you can possibly hurt the tree. And you don't want to. And about this time of the year, from January to March, is the best time to tap. The only time to tap, because they're dormant, and you want freezing nights and warm days to pull the sap up out of the tree. And then so it goes up to the tree leaves, and then nighttime it pulls down to the roots. And once I have the hole drilled, I have a spile that I tap in, and this is what a spile looks like here. So this longer end right here will go into the tree trunk, and this right here will go into either your like a little plastic line that I have right here, and it just fits up on here like so. And if I have more than one tap in a tree, I'll put those lines into a 5-gallon bucket. And if it's just one tap, I'll have a jug hanging off of that tap. And when you tap that spile in, you want to tap it in gently till you hear a thud. And then it tells you it's snugly in place in the tree. And then once you hook everything up, and then you just wait overnight, then you collect your sap every day. And I store it in cooler containers to have enough to do like after 3 or 4 days, maybe till the weekend. And I have a homemade wood-fired evaporator that I made myself.
Okay, so hold on. Let's go back for a minute. So when you're tapping the trees, the sap comes out. How much sap do you actually need to make 1 gallon of syrup?
You need roughly about 40 to 42 gallons of raw sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup.
That's a lot of gallons. So where do you put that? How do you refrigerate that until you're ready to cook it down?
Well, a lot of times you'll have snow outside, so I could take my coolers and pack it into like a snowbank.
Okay, I see.
Or like your nights will be cold enough that they'll stay cold, because if they actually can spoil because there's a sugar content in that sap, so it can spoil just like milk if you don't keep it cold.
Okay, so if it's cold outside and you have a snowbank or something, it's safe to keep it outdoors.
Yeah, I keep about no longer than 3 days myself personally. If it's not frozen, like I'll have to cook it right away.
Okay, how long does it take you to collect 40 to 42 gallons of sap? I guess it would depend on how many trees, right, you're tapping.
Yeah, for instance, I had a total of 12 taps this year, and we make enough just for our family to consume, or maybe give away as Christmas gifts and stuff. So I had 12 taps out, and in 3 days I had, or 2.5 to 3 days, I had about 40 gallons collected.
Okay, well that's not too bad then.
Mm-hmm. I had a lot of warm days that week, so it was really producing good.
Okay. Okay, so once you have it stored, you have your 40 to 42 gallons, what is the next step in the process?
So I'll take it to my homemade evaporator that I heat with firewood, and I got 2 steam tray pans on it, and the back pan is generally hotter than the front pan, so I keep my front pan as like a warming pan, and then as the sap in the pan goes down, I'll ladle the sap out of the front pan into the back pan to keep a constant feed into it, and to also keep a constant boil going on, because if you put cold sap right into a hot pan, you'll kill the boil, and it'll take a lot longer of a time to cook your syrup down.
I see. Okay, and how long does that whole process take?
I just have a small evaporator that I made, so I can boil about 3 gallons per hour. But once it gets about a ladle's depth deep into my pans, then I'll take it inside on the stove top to finish it.
Okay. So part of the time it's cooking outside, and then you bring it inside, and you're finishing off the cooking inside.
Yes, because you think about it, you're evaporating all that sap, which is all water mainly, and you don't want all that condensation in your house.
Okay.
And you couldn't cook it very fast. So that's why you need to do it like over an open fire or something like outside.
Okay, so then once it's all done and you're done cooking it, then what's the next step?
Once I get inside and I go to finished temperature, I'll filter it.
What's the temperature that you should be cooking, and what is the temperature for the end part? I know you said there was 2 different temperatures or something.
Yes, so you want your finished product to be about 7.5 degrees above boiling temperature of water. So generally in my area, water boils at 212 degrees. So if you add 7.5 degrees, that's 219.5 degrees. And I use a candy thermometer to check the temperature. And once it reaches that point, I will filter it through a cone cloth filter to remove the impurities and niter sand, a byproduct of it. And it'll come out crystal clear. And then I'll put it back on the stove to reheat to about 180 degrees. Then I'll hot pack it that way so I know that it's sterile going into the jars.
Okay. When you're actually evaporating and cooking it outdoors, is there a certain temperature that it has to be, or does it matter?
It don't matter. I just try to keep the fire as hot as I can and get a good draft going, because the harder and faster you cook it, the faster it'll evaporate.
Okay, so then once you hot pack it, do you have to refrigerate it? Can you keep it on your shelf? What do you do for the storage of that?
I keep it in my pantry, and then
Okay.
once we open it, we'll put it into the fridge. But sometimes we'll actually have old glass maple syrup jars that people's bought from the store with syrup, and we have those, so we'll refrigerate those because they're not sealed, so we can use them right away or give them
Okay.
away as
And
gifts.
how long would you say they would last in the fridge if they didn't go through like the hot packing and the sealing?
Um, Probably a couple months.
Okay. Have you ever seen it go bad?
One time I didn't have a good seal before, and in my pantry I opened up, I had a little bit of mold growing on top of it.
Okay.
But all I needed to do was, actually it just floats on top of the syrup. It don't hurt it. So I had to scoop it out, and I recooked it down to make sure everything was safe for myself.
Okay. I just was curious as to what it would look like if it was bad, if it would just mold or if it would get a bad smell or what that looked like.
Hmm.
So that was really good information. Thank you so much for sharing that. So where do you actually see yourself in the next 5 years and the progress of your homestead?
Yes, I see myself in 5 years of having my own homestead of my own, and I hope to see a garden that we can have enough produce to, majority of our produce be grown for ourselves to keep us year round. And I hope to have a main sugar shack for my maple syrup hobby. And I plan to see a pasture poultry and maybe some pigs for ourselves to keep in our freezer.
And will that come with you relocating to another property, or will you be doing this continue like at the grandmother's house?
I think a lot of it will get moved to my own property, but I would imagine, like, such as the fruit trees and stuff like that. And if we don't have maple trees at our house, we'll do those two things at the grandparents' farm.
Nice, very nice. So we're getting ready to wrap up. If you can sum up in one word what your homesteading experience has meant to you thus far, what would that word be?
I would have to say rewarding. It's just rewarding of what your hard work, what you get out of it, and how it benefits you as a person.
It's a good word. Thank you, Michael, for joining me today and spending this time with me. I
Hey,
appreciate
thank
it.
you for having me again.
Sure, absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.